We can connect these ideas of emerging technologies into all businesses, but most of what I talk about is how we connect this into education. So as Vladimir said, I am at Rutgers Prep, and I'll be there until June 30th. And then on July 1, I'll be moving to Saddle River Day School, which is in northern New Jersey. And I'll be their Chief Global Impact Officer and really work on expanding programs into other countries. So I want to talk a little bit about resilient infrastructure. And this is one of the UN SDGs, number 9. And it's a challenge for people as we go forward, because we do have this goal of this resilient infrastructure, but at the same time, we now face this constantly changing infrastructure. Many of us saw, right after, I think it was November 30th, right at the end of November, when ChatGPT 3 became quite popular. It was announced, it goes out. They had 1 million people get accounts within 5 or 6 days, but they also they hit 100 million within the first 60 days. So these kind of things are making such a big change, and now we're talking about it a little bit more, but they've already updated it to the next GPT-4. So when we talk, we also always talk about what is innovation, and how does that how do people think about innovation, and especially in education. We have a joke at our school that it is easier to change the course of history than change a history course. So education is very slow to change. So innovation is hard. And one of the reasons is we often teach the way that we were taught, and we teach the things that we were taught, and how do all these changes coming through society. We do talk a lot about lifelong learning, but we want to make sure that we actually practice that. And then we'll talk a little bit about like how we see, my friends and I, we talk about the impacts that we see for emerging tech in education and other places. And that's a lot of that is going to be Web3 and VR. So the resilient infrastructure is something that the UN has this as SDG number 9, and we want to, it's written on the side there. We want to get everybody connected and innovate into this new, or we shouldn't call it a new infrastructure, because it's just a constantly changing infrastructure. And we really need teamwork. We need people on all sides, academia, governments, everybody working together with the business to build up the infrastructure that is always improving and changing. So we would like, what does innovation look like in a business or a school? And when we talk about this, it's important to note that, yeah, unique aspects of a school or a business are very interesting, but they're not always innovation. So remember, as we go through this, think about what is the innovation, and how is something innovative. This comes from Amy Webb's presentation last year at South by Southwest, and so she works with the Future Today Institute. And so what do you see when you look at this image? What is it that, what information is there? And then if I add a little bit of information, does that change, how you think about it, and add a little bit more? And a little bit more, and apologies that, I kind of sketched it out with one of those digital pens, drew on the picture. But now that you've gotten some additional information about the image, it's very difficult to unsee what was there. And this is called Dillenbach's cow. And you can get the pictures online. Not the terrible additions that I drew in with the pen, but the actual image here. And so how do we unsee the things? It's just not possible. So as we see these new innovations coming through, it's important for us to take those new ideas and integrate those into the work that we're doing. And so when we think about emerging trends, artificial intelligence has been around for a very long time. I believe we're at least 60 years in to where the first artificial intelligence conferences started. And now, having said that, we don't always perceive that. There's plenty of artificial intelligences, that we're a little bit more accustomed to. There are several cars now, right, that will drive. We used to have cruise control in a car. Now you can have a car that changes speeds based on the car in front of you. Your car can, according to the commercials on television, I haven't seen one, but they can change lanes. I was at South by Southwest EDU, and some of the people there were talking about 11 o'clock at night I think it's in Austin and also in San Francisco. Now the self-driving taxis come out. So they're out from about 11 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning. So these are taxis driving without drivers. And how is that going to impact us? Are we ready for a time when children start to show up at school in the morning, dropped off by a car that doesn't have a parent or driver in it? How does that work? Right? How do we get these types of vehicles to move through the drop-off line if the kids aren't walking into school or being dropped off by a bus? We have all different types of augmented reality, mixed reality, virtual reality. The Meta is one of the more famous companies with their Oculus headsets. Lots of focus there on virtual reality. We just heard in announcements earlier this week that it looks like Apple might be delaying the discussion about their augmented reality and virtual reality glasses beyond June. So with those, the discussion seems to be around say like a glass type glasses that you would put on a smaller headset, and you would be able to switch a button so that it would either augment your current environment or switch to complete virtual reality, where you're the only thing you're seeing is the projection onto the goggles or in the goggles. The augmented reality is, we see this with maps, right? When you walk down the street, you can hold it up and your phone up, and it can give you a direction to walk down the street. The Snapchat filters in lots of the sports events now, they augment the field with different things that you would see things you see on television that you don't see when you're in the stadium themselves. In Web 3, you're looking at a lot of decentralized things. So there's a lot of work around blockchain, and for education, a lot of work in digital certificates using the blockchain. We might see some schools have already talked about paying their tuition in cryptocurrency. Yeah, that's totally possible and quite likely, but the real use that I see for it is the digital certificates. And having that decentralized network, we have hundreds of thousands of students that move to the United States in each fall for school, and they have to have their transcripts verified by a third party. if we move this to digital certificates, then the price goes from about $350 down to about 10 cents. And so all the schools would just put their records up into a blockchain, and then the universities would be able to receive those records for almost no price, almost no price to the student. The blockchain is a large electronic ledger that can't be forged or altered. So if I create a digital certificate of a student, and we did this for our graduating class last year, the student diploma that we created, if I spelled the person's name wrong on the diploma, I can't change it. I can only delete it, so that and then reissue a new one with the correct record. So we know that no students can pass this along and edit them or something like that, so that transcripts, everything could be in one of these in the blockchain. And then you also have now a lot of discussion about Internet of Things and 6G. We're trying to get 5G networks out of the cell phones, but the 6G discussions have already, are well into their establishment too, because this will allow a huge interconnected network of devices. So we need to think about this and how this will impact the things that we do in the schools. We won't, if we have a drone program, we will not need line of sight on drones. Our students will be able to drive them beyond the line of sight. So how does that impact, what we do in our program, and how do we get those drones to come back? Those kind of things we need to think about so many different things. So back to that reperception idea. We now have all this new information of ChatGPT-4, Lambda, which is Google's version of an AI that's integrating with Bing, and the Google one I think is called Bard. And so they're all in these, they're releasing all these AIs. And how does that impact what we do? We have lots of AI that's been analyzing the results of the students in their online classes, especially how they're interacting. We have AIs that look through and study student results. We have AIs that search through all the SAT results and find particular groups that might be interesting to a college. So a college can purchase the names of the students that are from an area or score a certain amount or have a certain type of background. Those kind of things, we've had that, but now we're moving to the point where the AI is going to be able to help teachers. One of our students is already built teachers enter in the vocabulary list, and then the AI creates all the sentences for the vocabulary quiz, and then removes the words that are on the list, so that there's a blank there, so that the students have to answer their quiz. But this is all done for the teacher. So we're seeing so many things that could start to save a teacher's time, or this could also save students' time. So how does that impact what we do? Lots of office tasks. We've been talking at our work about with marketing and development, and how we messaging that goes out to families. What does that look like? You really need to be running, all your messaging through AI to just verify grammar and spell check, those kind of things, because that's parents are going to be expecting, customers are going to be expecting that from the schools when you have that tool available. And then the whole when we have self-driving cars, what's it like when we have self-driving trucks delivering to our business or school? The whatever the delivery truck might be arriving with, how does that work without a driver in it? Or, are we going to be expected to unload things that arrive, or is there, is that going to be something that they definitely need a driver for, because they need somebody to take the equipment out of the truck? And the same with the buses and students arriving in busing. So, how do we budget for these things? What changes are we looking at? I mean, some of the college, there's a lot of discussions about ChatGPT in colleges, and some of the colleges are moving towards a system where 80% of an essay might be created by the AI, the ChatGPT type AI, and then the student is responsible for checking the facts, making sure that this is where they want it to go. The idea of prompt engineering is going into many businesses, but that's what a lot of the students are going to have to do going forward, engineering the prompts that go into the AI to make sure it's bringing out the material that they want. So if their workload goes from 100% of an essay down to 20% of an essay, does that mean they'll be getting more essays, or their essays will have to be longer, or will there be a higher expectation on them? And the same for all the different parts of things that we have in work. It's not just budgeting resources in the sense of money, but you also have to, how are you budgeting your time? Do you need the same size marketing team? Do you need a bigger team? Do you need a smaller team? What is your focus there? In schools, there's a lot of discussion about advancement, especially at independent private schools, where we're interacting with donors. And how do we know, how do we have those conversations so that we continue to grow the endowments of the school? If all the students get to a point where their satellite service, because I think we're moving from a time that's just like AT&T and Verizon and other mobile servers to satellite service. If all the students and teachers and everybody have their own service, then do we need the same Wi-Fi inside the school? Do we need one of those 5G networks in our school because we can't get a good satellite signal or whatever it is in our area? All of those infrastructure, how do we hook up to printers and copiers and stuff like that if we're not in a school network? We have to think through all of those things. And then also, like, how does this impact our tuitions and revenues for auxiliary programs? What's available, and what is new that it's going to be expected for us that we provide these changing programs. And so all of these trends are things that we need to consider as how they impact what is happening in your school. And then we talked about XR and Web3 and IoT. The LEO network is the low Earth orbit. So this is what we see when SpaceX sends up a satellite. When SpaceX sends up a rocket, they are dropping satellites up in, they have already put up thousands of satellites, and their network will be at least 10,000 satellites. And then they will cover the planet in a satellite signal. And they're not the only ones, right? Amazon is also trying to do this. And there are at least 12 different companies / countries trying to establish these low Earth networks. And we see now with the new the advertisements from Apple, when you're in an emergency, you can just hold your phone up and aim it at a satellite, and your emergency signal inside the US can go to one of the satellites. The goal is to get so that everybody has that option with a satellite signal on their mobile device. When that happens, we will add about 2 billion people to the internet. So those are people that just don't have the infrastructure in their area yet. When that happens, then yeah, this is why they're doing it. That's adding a lot of customers, but that also is adding a lot of people who we can share education with. And that's where I think the schools have a really amazing opportunity going forward if they work together in consortiums and try and help each other out. I don't know what happened there. Okay, so it's important when we have these discussions that we talk about innovation versus strategy. Too many times in education, where I have most of my experience, we have a discussion like, oh, let's talk about innovation. What innovative ideas can we have, and where are we going with these different ideas that we start? And we're about 2 or 3 sentences into the conversation, and we moved out of innovation into strategy and potentially moved on to tactics. So innovation does not have, and when you're having those discussions, don't put parameters up and guardrails yet. Do that when you get to strategy. So have these discussions and let them sit, and don't rush into a strategy or even a tactics discussion during that same conversation. Just let the ideas flow and try and come up with new ideas and what you can do, and then let it sit, and then come back later and have another conversation. Like, okay, here are all these ideas. We don't have an infinite number, amount of money, so we got to cut some of these out, and it's not really within our mission or focus to open up a completely different program or include a completely different program. So those are the parameters that we start to look at where we develop our strategy. And then as you're moving through strategy, then you can have the next conversation of tactics, and how do you implement those, how do you implement the tactics that are going to get your goal, these innovative ideas, into practice. And here's a quote from Sun Tzu. So yes, we need innovation, we need strategy, and we need tactics. We just try and not have them all happen in the same 5-minute discussion. Right? Take some time and let things settle in, and people will come to, at least in my experience, much better discussions. Keep hitting the wrong button, sorry. I should, with the Dellenbach's cow, Amy Webb is I think she has at least 4 books out. One of them, Signals, is I enjoy all her work, but this is a kind of a map that she put up online about how she starts to think about all the different things. I know that the writing is terrible there. You can't read it, but this is connecting ideas of how things going forward. How does AI connect into Web 3, and how does it connect into VR? We've already seen in the last couple of weeks, several of the virtual reality companies have AI now integrating. So you can have an avatar in a virtual reality environment who's, when you speak to that avatar, the responses are coming out of ChatGPT. So you can be meeting with an AI while you're in virtual reality. Khan Academy has already announced that they're integrating ChatGPT. Instacart is integrating ChatGPT. So you can now you can get more information about menus that you might put together, or the health and safety of different products that you might buy in the grocery store using while you're in the Instacart. I don't know who it is, but somebody said they have an app now where you can open your refrigerator, take a picture of the items in the refrigerator, just one picture of your open refrigerator, and then the AI can tell you what you might be able to make for dinner based on the things that are in your refrigerator. So like when you have that kind of work, like how does that influence what we can do in the classroom? It used to be, we would say it used to be that we would say the students were struggling with addition or multiplication or long division, but that is we might be able to go a little bit deeper and say, oh, this student is not struggling with multiplication, they're struggling with multiplication table only with things that are 7 or something like that. So all these different types of the information that teachers will get going forward is going to be really amazing. So it's going to be important for schools to think about what is their information flow, what is who's bringing the information in, and how does that impact what they do in the school. There we go. I'm getting better at which button to push. Sorry. For schools, what we're recommending now is some kind of like chief innovation officer, somebody that can bring a wide range of information into the schools and help the schools see what's possible and what changes are there, what might be an advantage in their area. So in the United States, we have lots of AP exams. If your school is from kindergarten to 8th grade, that's not something useful. So if they change every AP exam, it doesn't matter for the K-8 school. So we got to make sure that we're bringing the right information in to schools. And we think that smaller schools will potentially share these positions, right? Maybe the person is there once a week or something like that, and they're working in 5 different schools that have worked together. So we want to also look at board composition. When we were building projects, we would often, for our board, we would want to make sure we have somebody on the board that's an architect, somebody on the board that may be a project manager, somebody on the board that's good with financing, building projects, and those kind of things. You bring them together so that they can support the organization as you move through this building project. Now what we see is we're going to start to put together board members from different fields who can bring information in, because the information that's changing in the field, all our students hope to become members of society and get jobs and make contributions, but we need to know where the fields are going so that we can help support the kids, the students, as they learn how to get to those levels. The division heads, the department heads, everybody has to be taking the information that they get and getting it down to the people that are in the schools working day to day with the students. And it's going to change from the math department is going to need different information than the 2nd grade teacher. So we would make sure that everything is moving along like that in a good steady flow. And then are the leaders getting out? It doesn't always involve traveling. You can learn a lot without traveling, but sometimes you do need to travel to some place or a conference or something and make sure that they're getting the right information. And I don't think this is always an education. If it's education, I don't think it's always an education conference. I think sometimes it's going to a related field and seeing what's happening there. I think there's big advantages in trying to find those things and bring them in. all the somewhat related, right? Because you're in that case, you're effectively crowdsourcing the information. Talked a little bit about this. So, putting together a diverse board. What skills do you need? What are you going to need in the future? This is hard to predict, but really important to think about and have that conversation. At some point, the school I'm at is over 250 years old. At some point in time, we stopped teaching students how to sharpen the feather and write with ink on the quill. At some point, we stopped that. We at one point we integrated pens and pencils. We integrated textbooks. These things, there's changes over time. I've been there for 23 years, and I was there the year that we first gave teachers laptops. So all these changes are coming, and we just need to, think about this, process this, and make sure it's something important for us to do. Right? We should not be wasting our resources, both time and money, in all these decisions. And then where are the students, too, right? This is a chart that I got from Halone IQ, and this shows a 30-year projection on graduation. And you can see we're running about over the next 30 years, we'll graduate about 700 to 750 million people will graduate in Asia. That's a lot of students, right? That means that the continent of Asia needs to build a university the size of Ohio State in the United States, and they must do that once every 5.5 days for the next 30 years in order to keep up with capacity. So I don't even know that there's enough concrete to do that. So what will we be looking at? How will we help all those students get an education? I believe that a lot of it is going to be done online and through virtual reality, so that we connect with the places that have teachers and have the technology to support all those students as they just continue to grow. It's just the numbers are massive. Right now, we spend about $6 trillion a year on education as all of humanity together. When you look at where we're going, it's going to be huge infrastructure that we need to build out. So when we're in education discussions, we're also a lot of times we're talking about how we see auxiliary programs, because you have, in the United States, you have two options. You can teach, you have the families that go to your school and pay tuition. You have those same families, you can charge them more money, or you can find more families and charge them the same money. And that's just the way economics grow. When you think about, especially now, and I think it's even more pronounced outside of education, there are so many offices and buildings that are not being used, that were being used pre-COVID. They were at least being used 5 days a week. And now some of them are, down to 40, 50% of capacity. So how do we repurpose all those different buildings? I think that there's a range of options. When we talk to schools, we talk a lot about running camps in the summer that are academic, and also blend in some of the sports programs that helps meet the visa things in the US. But then just short-term programs in general are a huge advantage. And the price of $1,000 per week at non-residential, that's actually what people are paying in New Jersey in the summer, right? A non-residential. So these kids just come in the morning and go out in the afternoon, and they have a camp that's, there's a huge amount of work that's being done there. And we do see that that trifurcated model of some education will be done in person, some of it will be done in what we've seen grow online, and then we do think some of it will be done in virtual reality. There's some really interesting research out of Morehouse College where the students, they ran the same section in 3 different ways: in person, online, and in VR. And the students that were learning in VR outperformed the students in the other sections. A lot of people figured that it was going to work for online, but we were a little surprised by the whole outperforming the in-person students too. So how does that happen? We need lots and lots more research on that, but we do see that as a big advantage going forward. My wife is a kindergarten teacher at our school, and she teaches the kids in her room. This year are the class of 2035. So here are some of the things that by 2032, Google is estimating that all the passwords, for accounts and everything is going to be hacked, right? So they're telling the governments to all be prepared to move to biometrics, which we, Face ID, thumbprints, that kind of stuff. We've already seen that transition start to occur. So everybody's going to try and be ready for that by 2030. So here, these kids that are in my wife's kindergarten class, they might not have to remember passwords, right? How is that going to impact, the things that they do? They would probably do a lot better than me because I forget passwords all the time. We do see AIs building out, and 5 years from now, the AIs will be able to build buildings in a metaverse. So I'll be able to tell the AI to build a virtual reality version of my classroom, and then I'll be able to have meetings in that. Here's some numbers on the in the US. We'll have over 150 colleges and universities that have a digital twin campus where students can go in and take classes in virtual reality by the end of this year. Right? San Francisco has the self-driving taxis. They have the problem where there were too many of them on the road, and they asked the companies to slow down because they were running into an issue. There were so many self-driving taxis that when the emergency vehicles came by and all the self-driving taxis pulled over, which they do, they're all trained to do that, but they actually blocked the road because there were so many of them there and they couldn't get them out of the way. And the students, so in my wife's kindergarten class, the class of 2035, 2 of the students in that class, I taught their parents. And I know that those parents went to the school I teach at, but back before iPhones. They graduated in the 2004, 2005, 2006 area. So we're about to enter a time period where the parents in our school grew up with iPhones and iPads. So when that happens, what are the expectations on the school? One of the things that we talk about is all the iPad, the children that used iPads in schools, they have a third access. I was brought up with an X and a Y axis, like a spreadsheet in my head. And the students that have always had access to pinch and grab and zoom on screens and done, all those video games and that are 3 dimensions, they have that third access and they think a little differently, right? They entertain different ideas, and it's really going to be interesting to see where we go. This is a little video from the New York Times. It's one of my favorite things. It's of the flight of some birds over a pond in New England. All the birds in the image, right? Everybody takes the 6 or 7 birds in their neighborhood right around them and uses that as an input as to where to go. So you see, and many of us, right? We have the 6 or 7 teachers around us, or the people that work near us, and that's how we think about and use as information sources. And we really do need to we need to think a little bit more about how we can make changes going forward. So This is a little QR code so you can find me.